So, recently I finished up the house in Fata Morgana, going in almost entirely blind as I do for all my VN experiences. I have to say this was quite the emotional ride. While it was definitely on the shorter end of the visual novels we've played on this channel to date, I don't think that held it back in any way. One of the most impressive things to me was the writing. I've been reading a lot of mediocre manhwa over the last few months and feel like this was exactly what I needed to remind me of what good writing actually looked like. One of the key focuses of Fata Morgana was how circumstance and perspective can change one's understanding of the underlying facts, and it manages this extremely well. Every character seems to be a motivated and active participant in their own fate. Everyone seems to have their own motive that operates according to their own understanding of the world. Every person in the story kind of feels like they have their own struggles that they had to deal with, and either by circumstance or conflicting motivations, they run afoul of each other. In broad strokes, I feel we could paint most of these tales as romantic tragedies. However, I feel the writers did an excellent job of steering clear of the most common tropey characters, resulting in just about everyone who had screen time being an interesting character. Sure, there's a couple characters who aren't exactly all that likable, but I appreciate that everyone with a sprite has more depth than a puddle and the presence of strong leading characters. As I said earlier, this was very emotionally driven work. While the story presents itself as a series of stories told under an overarching meta-narrative, the first place this visual novel stands out is in its ability to draw you into its individual stories. While the first three stories seemingly share at most one individual who barely plays any part in driving the narrative, leaving you with effectively an entirely new cast, each story does manage to effectively draw you in, emotionally investing you in that specific tale well before its conclusion. And as we progress later into the story, the meta-narrative, which started out with very little in the way of interest, it'll develop into one of its own interesting tales, furthered by stories we previously experienced. Moving on to the visuals, I have to say the CGs were excellent. I ran an unmodded copy of the game on PC, and the art was both striking and atmospheric. I honestly couldn't really find much to complain about regarding the CGs. The sprites were overall quite enjoyable. However, I feel that the siblings behind the first door, Nelly and Mel, as well as Maria from the third door, weren't quite as high quality and lacked variety. When looking at the sprite sheets after finishing the game, they are noticeably less appealing. However, overall, I thought they did a good job and wouldn't consider this a noteworthy issue, especially since some of the sprites are really quite emotive and the overall standard is quite high. Another nice thing about the visuals only shows itself in a later chapter when we begin changing narrator. Despite being primarily an ADV game, when in a section with changing narrators, they kind of add this unobtrusive graphical outline on the right side of the text, flowers for one character and leaves for another. An easy hint as to who's talking that leaves no ambiguity when we're reading lines and there's the omniscient narrator speaking to us. The soundtrack was solid, if somewhat lacking in standout track. While I'm not rushing to load the OST into my playlist, I do think overall it met the mood most of the time and didn't really have any noticeable issues with the track or the audio overall. It was pretty good. Gameplay-wise, this is overall linear, but it does have some branching options resulting in bad ends, as well as a few sections where some or all of the choices can be taken in any order. There's a definitive ending you can reach on the first try, and there's also a couple option selections where not selecting anything is also a choice. Most of these are fairly well framed as being extremely urgent, and there's no significant dexterity issue making the right one, but you might end up having to reload a earlier save a couple times if you're the kind of person who wants to save before every single branch, like me. At the time of this recording, the house in Fata Morgana is rated an 8.8 on Visual Novel Database, aka VNDB, and it's rated 12th below Demon Muramasa, Umineko, half of Higurashi, Tsukihime, and Steins Gate, but above Stay Night and Clannad. Now, do I think Fata Morgana deserves such an esteemed rating? Absolutely. This VN is certainly going in my personal top 10. I hope this review interests you enough to give the game a read, or read along with me. I tried to avoid being too specific as there's a lot to discover, and that's half the fun of a story like this. Enjoy.